It began like any other suburban dream, at least from the outside. A quiet house, a seemingly large and happy family, and parents who looked ordinary enough to blend into the background of American life. But inside that home, behind closed doors, a nightmare was unfolding, one that would later be described as one of the most disturbing cases of child captivity in modern history. This is the story of the Turpin family and the children who lived in chains. The night was silent, the street was dark, and a 17-year-old girl, trembling, malnourished, and terrified, stood outside a window, clutching a stolen phone. She had never dialed 911 before. She barely even knew what freedom felt like. But tonight, she was going to try. Her voice cracked as she whispered into the phone, "I can't stay here. My parents are abusive. My sisters are chained to their beds." The dispatcher froze. Within minutes, a shocking chain of events would unravel, one that would shake America, horrify the world, and reveal a secret so dark people still struggle to understand how it could happen in a modern home. David and Louise Turpin were not the kind of parents anyone questioned. To their neighbors, they were a bit strange, quiet, isolated, overly protective, but never dangerous. They often kept to themselves, rarely socialized, and refused to let their children play outside. But people assumed it was just their parenting style. Inside, however, the Turpin home was nothing like the picture-perfect photos the family posted on Facebook. Those smiling images, birthday parties, matching outfits, and theme park trips were carefully staged illusions designed to hide a secret life of severe abuse and control. The children, 13 in total, ranged from toddlers to adults in their late 20s, yet many of them appeared far younger than their age, frail, thin, and frightened. They had been denied schooling, denied food, denied sunlight, denied childhood. Everything in the house was about control. Louise and David controlled when the children could eat, sometimes only once a day. They controlled when the children could sleep. They controlled when the children could speak. They were allowed to at all. Most days, silence filled the home. Sometimes, it was broken by the sound of chains. The parents used padlocks and heavy metal restraints to tie some of the children to their beds, punishment for even the smallest disobedience. One daughter was chained for months. Another child was shackled simply for washing her hands too many times. The house smelled of filth, waste, and decay. Rotting food was everywhere. The children were rarely allowed to shower. They wore the same dirty clothes for weeks, sometimes years, and yet, the parents kept the illusion alive on social media: birthday cakes, matching dresses, smiling family portraits. No one knew the truth. For years, the children dreamed of escape. But there was one problem: they didn't know how the outside world worked. They had never been to school. They didn't know simple vocabulary. Most didn't know their own birthdays. They didn't know what a police officer actually did. They didn't even understand what the word free truly meant. Yet one girl, the 17-year-old, began to imagine a life beyond the chains. She secretly watched Justin Bieber videos on an old smartphone she found in the house. She listened to music, memorizing the lyrics, imagining herself somewhere else. Anywhere else. Music gave her courage. She began planning. She began watching. She began memorizing the layout of the neighborhood through tiny cracks in the window blinds. And one day, after years of silent suffering, she made her move. It was just after midnight when she crawled out of the window. She had never stepped outside alone before. Her heart pounded as she ran into the darkness, gripping the phone she had stolen from her parents. She didn't even know her exact address. She barely knew what to say. But she pressed 911 anyway. The recording of her call later stunned investigators. "My 2 little sisters are chained up right now. I've never been out. I don't know the roads. I can't breathe. Please help us." The dispatcher asked her how long she and her siblings had been abused. She paused and whispered, "As long as I can remember." Moments later, officers arrived at the Turpin house. They knocked on the door. David and Louise answered calmly, smiling, polite, pretending nothing was wrong. But when the officers stepped inside, the truth revealed itself instantly. The smell hit them first. Then the sight of thin, weak children in dirty clothes, and finally chains, real chains. And the nightmare began to unfold. What police discovered inside the house was worse than they ever imagined. Evidence that stunned investigators. Conditions that defied belief. Children who didn't know what freedom meant. Until that night, when the police stepped into the Turpin home, the silence inside was almost unnatural. It wasn't the quiet of a sleeping family. It was the quiet of fear, a silence so deep, so heavy, it felt like the walls themselves had learned to stay quiet. And then, the officer saw them, children, standing frozen, thin, pale, trembling, their eyes wide apart, confusion, part terror, part hope. Some were so weak they could barely hold themselves upright. Some looked like small children, but were actually adults in their 20s. Several had shackles, actual metal chains. The officers suddenly realized this wasn't just neglect. This was full captivity. One of the first officers on the scene later said, "They didn't look like children. They looked like survivors of a war." The kids didn't run toward the police. They didn't scream. They didn't cry. They simply stared like they were trying to understand what a police officer even was. Most of them had never seen one before. One of the younger boys whispered, "Are we finally safe?" The officers gently removed the chains one by one. The metal was heavy, rusted, cold. These weren't symbolic restraints. These were industrial chains, the kind you use to lock up machinery. The children winced in pain as the officers unlocked them. Their skin showed deep marks, rubbed raw from days and nights spent immobilized. Paramedics were stunned. Some children could barely walk. Some didn't know their real names. Most didn't know what a doctor was. Many had never eaten a proper meal in years. And then came the most chilling detail. They didn't know what freedom meant. When the children were brought to the hospital, more shocking truths surfaced. Doctors reported extreme malnutrition, muscle atrophy, cognitive delays, vitamin deficiencies, and severe psychological trauma. One of the girls, 11 years old, weighed the same as an average 3. One of the adult daughters, in her late 20s, weighed less than 82 pounds. The doctors had never seen anything like this in a modern home inside a developed country. A nurse said they were the sweetest children. They kept thanking us for giving them food. Another child cried because she thought the hospital food had to be earned through obedience. While the children were being examined, the parents were being questioned. David Turpin appeared emotionless. Louise tried to smile. Both attempted to pretend everything was normal. They insisted they were a loving, God-fearing family. They claimed the chains were for discipline. They said the children were homeschooled. They said their children were happy. Police did not believe a single word. When investigators showed them the photos of the conditions inside the home, the filth, the shackles, the rotting food, Louise finally broke down. But not with guilt, not with remorse. She was afraid of going to jail. She asked officers if she could take her children's Disney memorabilia with her. Her priorities spoke volumes. When the news broke, the world was horrified. How could this happen? How could so many children be abused for so long? Without anyone noticing, people questioned. Why didn't neighbors report anything? Why didn't the school system intervene? Why didn't social services know? The truth was chilling. Isolation had protected the abusers for decades. The parents moved frequently, avoided outside interactions, and built a life of secrecy so complete. Even extended family had no idea what was happening. The staged photos on social media matching outfits, smiling faces fooled everyone. It was a mask, a performance, a fantasy world built to hide a nightmare. When the Turpins were finally brought to court, the world watched. They pled guilty to multiple counts of torture, child cruelty, false imprisonment, and abuse of a dependent adult. The judge looked at the children, now slowly healing, and said, "This is one of the most disturbing cases I've seen in my entire career." David and Louise Turpin were sentenced to life in prison. For the first time in their lives, the children were free. They were given homes, education, therapy, real clothes, real food, real birthdays, real life. And most importantly, they were given a future. One of the children later said in an interview, "I didn't know people could be kind. Until the day we were rescued." Before we end this chapter of the Turpin family story, remember this. Some stories aren't just about darkness. They're about survival. They're about courage. They're about the human spirit refusing to give up. If you want more powerful true crime documentaries like this, stories of survival, justice, and the mysteries that shape our world, then do this right now. Subscribe to the channel, turn on all notifications, and comment below. Never ignore the signs. Share this video to spread awareness. Because the more people know these stories, the fewer nightmares will stay hidden behind closed doors.